Good evening, all. I, Dr. Khandelwal, welcome you all for this webinar on neonatal COVID. Firstly, I will like to welcome Dr. Elias Deshmukh, sir. Dr. Elias Deshmukh, sir, does not need any introduction. I consider him as a teacher who makes positive difference in perception and thinking of all of us. His dedication and excellence in neonatology is not hidden. We are very proud of you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And I request you to enlighten us, all of us, especially on neonatal COVID. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shamji, for the kind introduction. Good evening, all seniors, friends, and colleagues. We all are in the midst of this pandemic, very difficult and torrid period since 1.5 years. And during this 1.5 years, there are a lot of things have happened as far as COVID is concerned, and also the non-COVID things or other things are concerned in the society and everywhere. Since last 1 year and 1.5 years, this might be a perinatal COVID we started with. That was the first presentation I did last year. That was, I guess, in the month of April or somewhere. That was with IIP Neocon. We just shared initial difficulties of how to organize the care and all that. And then so many things are changing in COVID every day rather than every week or month, that we have to keep updated ourselves, and it is very difficult to keep updated. Pace of knowledge or pace of information which is flowing in is very rapid. But however, I am trying to gather or regather whatever I could. So let us start with the neonatal COVID rather than perinatal COVID. I am not going to speak too much about the maternal part of the COVID. My disclaimer is at all the points presentation is based on the current level of evidences as of today, which may or may not hold true tomorrow. I start with this quote from David Kimberlin in one of the editorials in Clinical Infectious Diseases in June 2020, where he said, "The last months have taught us anything, it is how rapidly things can change. Entire ways of life have been disrupted. The health of millions of people has been jeopardized, and many have been prematurely lost. The systems put in place over decades have been stretched and sometimes have broken. During these dizzying times, one of the challenges that we face is to know when to let go of previously held understandings and when to hold tight to that which has long proven to be true. All of us are experiencing this." Overview of my presentation would be, I will give a little bit about what is neonatal COVID infection, the routes of transmission or presumable routes of transmission, antenatal and immediate postnatal, mostly intrapartum and the postnatal management, the neonatal manifestations, the testing strategy which is presently followed, which is accepted across India, the discharge policy, the management, and our experience I will be sharing of COVID-19 in newborn at GMCH. So, friends, the case definition of a neonate who has a suspected COVID-19 is, of course, a baby born to a mother who has either a history of COVID-19 infection between 14 days before delivery and 28 days after delivery, or the newborn directly exposed to those infected with COVID-19. Now, this exposure could be from the family members, caregivers, medical staff, or visitors. Whereas a confirmed COVID-19 neonate, as we all know, is an RT-PCR positive baby. Not much rat is used in neonates. What are the potential modes of transmission in neonates? How are they how do they get infected? These are presumable or potential modes of transmission. One is an intrauterine transmission, whereby there is an hematogenous spread through placenta, or the baby inhales the particles while passing through the birth canal, the viral particles in the amniotic fluid, or baby has intramatum infection because of exposure to maternal secretions or infected maternal blood or infected feces. And in immediate postpartum transmission, it can be horizontal transmission through respiratory secretions, or it can be vertical through breast milk, which is, we will discuss subsequently whether it occurs and to what extent does it contribute. So this is a living systematic review. Living means the studies are going on, and at the same time, this systematic review has been conducted. And this was published in April 2021 regarding transmission of SARS-CoV-2 through breast milk and the breastfeeding. And the conclusion there was, currently there is no evidence of SARS-CoV-2 transmission through breast milk, and studies are needed with longer follow-up periods that collect data on infant feeding practices and on viral presence in breast milk. Mind well, in this living systematic review, there were 19 samples which had an breastfeeding breast milk positive for RT-PCR, but subsequent culturing was not done. And as you know, RT-PCR picks up the dead virus, and we never know unless we do cycling time, and which is very less, maybe more than 25 or more than 20, less than 25 or less than 20, then probably yes, there is an active multiplication. So up till now, there is no evidence of that, though the virus has been detected in some of the breast milk samples. So when it comes to managing the baby, it starts with the delivery room. Whether it is suspected or confirmed baby born to COVID-19 mother. What are the issues? One is we need to identify the area for delivery, area for resuscitation. We need to arrange for human resource, equipment, resuscitation, and transport. All of us are facing this, and we do it every day in and day out. So what should be the place where the delivery should occur, or how should be the delivery room? Ideally, the delivery room or resuscitation area should be separate with a negative pressure, air pressure, or at least it should have 2 exhaust fans. So it is preferable that it is the warmer or resuscitation warmer is not kept in the same room as the delivery is occurring. For safer safety of the baby and the health personnel, it is better to have an adjoining room. If that is not feasible, then only a resuscitation warmer is kept, which is separated by 6 feet from the mother's delivery area. As far as human resource is concerned, we need skilled neonatal team members. This is very important because if these babies need intubation, or if they need respiratory support in the delivery room, if the person is not skilled, then it can expose, or there is a risk of exposure to aerosols, and also there is a risk of morbidity and mortality. Minimum number of personnel should attend, 1 person should attend, but always keep a 1 person ready who is skilled in full resuscitation. This is the layout of a delivery room management. If you should preferably it is better to have a negative pressure room, but most of the facilities it is not available. So have a well ventilated delivery room. Whether we should do delayed cord clamping and the skin to skin immediately after birth, initially there was a lot of hesitancy, but now across all organizations they are recommending delayed cord clamping and skin to skin and early breastfeeding. The baby doesn't require resuscitation. What about betamethasone if there is a preterm delivery? Initially there was little worry about aggravation of infection, but as we have seen over a year, the steroids they help in COVID pneumonia. So now there is a strong recommendation of using betamethasone or steroid if there is it is a premature delivery. if you are managing in the same room, if you are having a resuscitation warmer in the same room, it is preferable to have a curtain and the warmer should be 6 feet away. Proper PPE kit should be worn. One person should be ready. Of course, these types of warmers, which is shown in the figure, which is a giraffe, it's a luxury. So we may not afford that, which is an incubator plus warmer. This is 2-in-1. As far as resuscitation is concerned, follow the NRP guidelines. If PPV is needed initially, we were thinking whether we should be using TPs or this device or that device. And now there is general consensus is you can use self-inflating bag as well as TPs resuscitator. But only thing is we need to use a disposable tubings. Very important to avoid routine oronasal suction, and ET administration of medications should be avoided. It may not be always possible. So this we have seen, but there has to be an incubator or some mechanism immediately after delivery to transport this baby once the baby is stabilized or resuscitated. It is preferable to have a skilled person whenever the intubation is necessary. In some of the centers, they are recommending using video laryngoscopy for intubation, but which is not affordable in most of the centers. And this is the PPE for the SCWs in resuscitation room to avoid the contact with the aerosol generating procedures. I told you at the beginning only, some of the centers or some recommendation is there of using a viral filter or expiratory filter for the bag or bag and tube or TPS resuscitator. But again, it adds to the dead space and it becomes very cumbersome. This important study, the figure which I took from, has shown that there is a difference between aerosol dispersion in the neonatal period versus the adult. As we can see here, the flow usually is 5 liters per minute of the flow to the bag, and tidal volume which is required is 6 ml per kilo, and the dispersion is just 1 to 2 centimeters. So not much of air is dispersing for a long distance. And based on this, as compared to adults, it is presumably it has been noticed, and many of the centers have started practicing that this phobia of aerosol dispersion is unfounded, but it is very important that not to forget about using proper PPE kit when it is resuscitation, intubation, or ventilation. Another thing here regarding the aerosol dispersion in delivery room is, mind you, when you are resuscitating or intubating an adult, he is already infected with the COVID, his viral load is very high, and his lungs are full of viral particles of the viruses. Whereas in newborn, mostly it is because of the prematurity or asphyxia, and at that time the lung is not infected or affected, and there is very little viral load in the baby. So it is all the more safe. But mind you, again, don't forget using proper PPE kit, because many a times I observed the residents, they do away with this PPE kit because they find it very cumbersome. But one thing we did in the NICU as well as in the resuscitation area in neonatal period is, we asked them to wear the HIV kits, which are a little more comfortable as compared to PPE kits, and they offer a good protection. As soon as the baby is stabilized, baby should be transported, preferably in the closed transport incubator. But if it is not available, then again use an open care system or a cradle, but with cling wraps cover on the warmer. When it comes to keeping the baby or managing this baby, again the same thing, organization of the care, testing strategy, feeding, neonatal manifestations, and treatment. We will see one by one. So where should these babies be kept? If the baby is stable, doesn't require resuscitation, it is a full-term delivery. Even if the baby is suspect or positive, it is preferable to keep the baby with the mother. Initially, when this pandemic started, There was an untold policy or some administrators they directed us that baby should be immediately separated, and many of the organizations also reputed bodies like AAP recommended immediate separation after birth from the mother. But as you know, separation creates a lot of problems, not only in the mother but in the baby also. And most commonly we have observed is these babies become unstable, they develop hypoglycemia, and subsequently they come very bad to the NICU, needing intensive care. So after initial maybe 1 or 2 months, we have started doing rooming in. But initially the recommendation was, of course, do rooming in should be done, but with a bed which is kept there, the cradle which is kept by the bedside, which is 6 feet away from the mother. Only during breastfeeding, mother is taking the baby with proper hygiene. She is breastfeeding the baby. Rest of the time, the baby is kept in the cradle. Now that interrupts the skin to skin, and it again deprives the baby of the benefits of the skin to skin care. And now, since last 6 months, we have started counseling the mothers. Initially, of course, it required a lot of counseling, but now they are accepting it very easily. In the postnatal wards, they are most of the time it is bedding in, and they are directly breastfeeding these babies. So for asymptomatic babies, I told you to be kept with the mother. For symptomatic babies, of course, they need to be isolated, kept in a COVID NICU or SNCU or a room, whatever facility you have, but it should be separate from the usual NICU or SNCU. In the NICU or the room, it is preferable to have closed incubators to avoid the aerosol generating the contact with the aerosols. But again, this is very cumbersome in our region, ours being a tropical country, and secondly, the using incubators required a lot of close monitoring. So there is so much of phobia around using incubators. We do use incubators because we need to keep the babies in the same NICU as that of suspect babies. But we usually prefer to keep babies who are relatively stable temperature wise. So we don't have to monitor them very closely. So that gives us some isolation. But important to have a distance of at least 1 meter in the room where the babies are kept, between the warmers, between the cradles or whatever. It is preferable to have air conditions with an 12 air exchanges per hour and a filtering exhaust air. As far as testing strategy is concerned, all babies who are born to a mother who has had exposure to COVID within 14 days or exposed to a positive person in the postnatal period or who presents with pneumonia or SARI. When should the test be done? In a suspect mother or a positive mother, we usually do within 24 hours, we do the first test. And the second test, if the first test is negative, we repeat the test more than 5 days. Usually between 5 to 7 days, we are doing the second test. But of course, if the baby develops any symptoms which are suggestive of COVID, then we have to do the test immediately. The first question again remains the feeding of these babies with COVID-19. I told you at the beginning only. Everybody's approach should be to human milk nutrition. If the mother is asymptomatic or mild illness, this is more beneficial to the baby. Again, through the breast milk, the babies are likely to get secretory IgA antibodies, and they are protected to certain extent by the passive immunity. So all the more preferable to give breastfeeding. Some skin to skin has to be done, but as and when mother wants to keep the baby, there has to be a cradle which should be provided. Of course, the mother should follow this respiratory and hand hygiene policy, and the breast wash has to be done. For moderate to severely sick mothers, of course, it is not possible to breastfeed her because she is very sick. We can do expression of the breast milk and give EBM. But again, it requires a lot of passion on the part of the obstetrician and the neonatologists and the pediatricians to pursue obtaining the EBM. And if it is obtained, it is well and good. Otherwise, we know that we have to give them the formula. So the first choice is a breastfeeding if it is possible. That is not possible, EBM, then donor human milk if you have the human milk bank, and then the formula. Coming to neonatal manifestations, I'm not going to discuss much about maternal manifestation. This slide I just showed you to tell you that contrary to belief, in the first wave, what we found was most of the mothers as well as the babies were asymptomatic. And you must have also observed very few mothers were symptomatic. In fact, in our study, as I will share subsequently, 1 or 2 mothers were symptomatic. So it was a feeling that it is very mild in the pregnant mother as well as the babies. But contrary to that belief, look at this data and look at the adjusted relative risk. It is higher for ICU admission, invasive ventilation, ECMO, and mortality in pregnant mothers as compared to non-pregnant mothers. So that fear, the feeling here, the perception is unfounded and it has to be changed, and we are observing that in the second wave, as I will share subsequently. As far as neonatal manifestations are concerned, most of the babies are asymptomatic. Some may have milder illnesses, but they have a very rapid recovery. Why they have mild illness in neonates? Again, this is a putative hypothesis or hypothetical. We do not yet know what are the likely factors and whether it is truly mild in neonatal COVID. One is immature immune system, second is passive transfer of maternal IgG antibodies, and lower ACE2 expression, not only on the placenta, on the baby's lung also. But history of exposure is the clue. Many a times it mimics sepsis, so we need a high index of suspicion. So any new onset of fever or distress in a stable baby or a baby from community should warrant investigations. Now, initially we were not knowing much about neonatal manifestation, but as the understanding has improved, as the information started coming in, the data started building up, there are 3 clear patterns which have been observed as far as clinical presentation is concerned. One is early onset neonatal COVID-19, where the illness starts between 2 and 7 days after birth. Again, these babies have mild illness or asymptomatic, and they can have temperature instability or inability to feed. Mind you, there are other features which are typical of a sepsis, but peculiar COVID may be diarrhea and nasal congestion or flaring. But as I am speaking to many of the neonatologists across India, what they observed was the most common feature, the first feature is decreased GI motility, not loss of interest in feeds. This is a feed intolerance. So early onset is usually, maybe it is perinatal transmission, of course, but it is not always vertical, and it is not always vertical. So there is a difference between perinatal transmission and vertical transmission. Because vertical means either through the placenta or through the breast milk, whereas perinatal means it can be horizontal also, or while passes through the birth canal. Another presentation is late onset neonatal COVID, which is onset more than 7 days, where the babies are readmitted, they are discharged, initially negative, they come subsequently positive with lot of features, and they may come in a bad shape with pneumonia usually, and feeding intolerance, apnea, respiratory distress. And this is usually because of postnatal transmission, and mostly because of the horizontal transmission, either from the mother or family members or the caregivers. So according to this systematic review done very early, maybe this was published in September 2020. The fever was the most common manifestation, followed by respiratory symptoms, GI symptoms, hemodynamic instability, and one baby had neurological abnormalities or neurological features. The third pattern, a lot of talk about in the second wave, is about multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. A similar type of syndrome has been observed in neonates. There are case reports and some case series also which are coming up. A lot of it is unpublished because very few studies have been, these case reports have been published of MIS. But this is definitely occurring, and my perception is we are missing it because initially we were not aware and now we are aware, so we need to diagnose them. And I feel that we will be diagnosing it more often. And the most characteristic feature of neonatal MIS again remains an cardiac involvement in the form of myocarditis, increased enzymes, and the coronary involvement, apart from the multi-organ dysfunction and coagulopathy. Here, the mechanism is not baby's antibodies, but it is the maternal antibodies which have been transferred to the baby. So there is a neonatal hyperimmune response. Before we go further, I just want to share some of the case reports which have been published, which I could catch hold of. The first case presented with hypotension, multi-organ dysfunction, again cardiac dysfunction, coronary artery dilatation was on echo. Baby as well as mother were RT-PCR negative. Treatment was given with IVIG. Baby improved. Second case was an asphyxia, had PPHN, but NT-proBNP was also normal. But the baby had an IgG positive, mother as well as the baby. And so based on that, they diagnosed this as an MIS. Other markers were also raised, of course, in this case. And the baby was treated with DEXA and the management of PPHN. Baby improved over 8 days. The third case was a 24-day-old neonate with features of cardiogenic shock, modes, had severe biventricular dysfunction, all markers raised, RT-PCR negative, but IgG positive in both baby as well as mother, treated with IVIG and MPS. And this is an unpublished report from Aurangabad, from Hegdewar Hospital. I took the permission from pediatrician there, a neonatologist, Abhishek, to mention this case. I discussed with him this case. This was a 1-day-old baby presenting with hematuria. USG showed a IVC thrombus, managed with steroids, IVIG, heparin, and mother as well as the baby had antibody positivity. But there was no cardiac involvement. That baby improved and doing well now. There are many reports, and many of you must be seeing amongst the audience these cases. But we are not putting, my appeal to all of you is, as far as neonatal or pediatric COVID is concerned, we need to document all the cases because everybody is learning, and we will learn only from each other and only when we document it properly. This is another photograph, another case report of a MIS who had cardiac involvement as well as skin involvement. Now I had seen this baby, one pattern of this in one of our babies, but we did not suspect MIS and we did not dig whether the mother had COVID or what. This is of course from the published case report. So this can occur skin gangrene, like you must have seen in rickettsia and all that. Which subsequently there is a scarification and then there is a exfoliation like that. So that should point towards the thrombus and an MIS, possible MIS. As far as investigations are concerned, again, CBC, CRP, these are the mainstay apart from the inflammatory markers. So this was the situation from the systematic review. 3 babies had an abnormal WBC count, 4 had lymphopenia, thrombocytopenia was there, but in neonatology there is so much of overlap as far as abnormal WBC, thrombocytopenia is concerned. But lymphopenia definitely, yes, it may be a pointer. and radiological pattern of pneumonia. Coming to treatment of neonatal COVID, most of it is supportive, but very important to give supportive treatment properly, because my worry is these babies are like other COVID patients, are managed in makeshift facilities, makeshift NICUs, and they are bound to receive suboptimal care, suboptimal monitoring, everything. And the outcome is not going to be as good as the babies who are managed in the usual NICU. Specific anti-COVID treatment, it's not yet recommended in newborns, though few case reports are there. I spoke to few of the neonatologists. They have tried using remdesivir. Immunizations, of course, should not be forgotten. Routine immunization, I mean. When it comes to severe COVID and managing it, they should be in a proper NICU. It's very important, because we are worried about their aerosols, we are worried about their positivity. They will be managed in some step down or a new makeshift facility. And I don't think these types of babies will survive there. It is preferable to have incubator. In babies with pneumonia, we need to use appropriate respiratory support. You may use Dexa, and people here also have started using Dexa in pneumonia. Present evidence doesn't support use of remdesivir in neonates. Now the remdesivir, the biggest concern is pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. But there are reports of remdesivir being used in neonates in the Ebola pandemic. So based on that, some of the organizations are thinking of whether we should be recommending remdesivir. And of course, D-dimer is raised, then whether we should be parentage the use of heparin, enoxaparin. Again, it has to be used with caution. No role of plasma. If MIS, of course, IVIG and the steroids. It's very important when you are managing these babies or even MIS, particularly MIS. You need to have an echocardiography at the bedside, and we need to have a pediatric cardiologist. Neonates are performing functional echo. Our unit is doing it since 1.5 years. My residents do. I have also learned a lot about it. But picking up the coronaries and then documenting the score is very important. And then we need a pediatric cardiologist for that. But what we can do, even if the echo is not there, we can do the cardiac markers and the ECG. Based on that, we can know that this baby is having a cardiac injury. Now, apart from this, recently there was one paper of using ultrasound, lung ultrasound in COVID-19 pneumonia. As you know, the lung ultrasound has acquired a lot of application in neonatology. So bedside lung ultrasound is also becoming an in thing. Of course, these are early days, but it needs a lot of expertise. I told you about appropriate respiratory support. It should be as per neonatal unit guidelines. Mild respiratory distress, only nasal cannula. We need to consider early intubation and mechanical ventilation. I told you endotracheal intubation by a skilled person. Avoid an excessive leak, so use a proper size DT. No use of cuffed endotracheal tubes. Some of the recommendations may mention using cuffed tubes, but in neonates, mind you, that is very risky. And it is preferable to start with a non-invasive support like CPAP, maybe BiPAP. HFNC is preferably avoided. Use of filters, it is being recommended by some of the organizations. But in neonates, particularly in preterms, it is going to add to the dead space. Moreover, they add to the cost. So it is, I would say that it is better to avoid it. So this is the distribution of support according to the systematic review. What are the supports which were required? And this is the feeding, breastfeeding in need babies, EBM in 3. Look at this, the formula in 17. That was initial days. Coming to discharge of these babies, if the baby is COVID positive and asymptomatic, baby can be discharged with the mother. If the baby has mild to moderate clinical course, then discharge after 10 days without repeating RT-PCR. For severe cases, it is recommended that we need to document a single negative RT-PCR after resolution of symptoms. But we are yet to come across such a severe case, and so that situation has not arisen. In a suspect neonate, we need to discharge with the mother. If the mother is sick and the baby is negative, this baby can be discharged at 24 to 48 hours with the caretaker who is negative. We have done that in many cases. So these were the systematic reviews last year. And look at the numbers. Numbers even in 28 studies, there are 44 positive cases, most of them asymptomatic, good outcome, vertical transmission not proved. So only in the subsequent or second wave, there are a lot of reports of neonates being affected as the awareness is rising, and various manifestations are becoming evident. But what I am worried about is the long-term impact of neonatal COVID. Not only about the virus causing the manifestations or affecting the baby, we do not yet know how it affects the baby. But apart from that, I have not mentioned here, but the consequences of this early or first trimester maternal SARS-CoV-2, we do not know whether it is teratogenic. We do not know, because not only this virus, but as we know, the most common manifestation of SARS-CoV-2 in adults is a fever, high-grade fever. And we know that high-grade fever in first trimester is teratogenic. And then the drugs are used to treat this SARS-CoV-2. So that is also a worrying thing. So any mother who is exposed to COVID in the first trimester, in follow-up, it is very important to follow with an ultrasound, particularly for the anomalies. Apart from that, a neonate who is born to a COVID-19 positive mother is affected by separation, increase in the cesarean section, no delayed cord clamping, no breastfeeding, and no KMC. Now, mind you, the KMC is affected across all facilities. Even in our unit, initially in non-COVID area also, all of us were worried about those mothers which are coming, they are sitting there, whether they will be positive. So we started screening the mothers with temperature and saturation. Some of the residents or the lecturers, they thought that we should be doing rat test and all that. But subsequently, after initial 3-4 months, we decided that we need to allow the mother and permit the KMC. Now, this is a research paper which was recently published regarding the kangaroo mother care in SARS-CoV-2 positive mother and the baby. And this study or the research paper did was, this was across 127 countries. India was one of them. And there were 3 centers from India which took part in this study. And this is a COVID-19 small and sick newborn care collaborative group. The finding of that paper is very important. The benefit of KMC is 65-fold higher than the mortality risk of COVID-19. What the model which was used was, supposing that all babies with the present rate of this transmission, even if all babies are affected, the mortality will be only less. This mortality will be less, more rather, whereas the KMC will reduce it by 65 times. So this is what was the finding. And if the evidence of 10% transmission was applied, the ratio increased to 630-fold. So there is an estimated 50% reduction in KMC coverage would result in 2.3 to 4.6% increase in neonatal mortality. So I told you that I am going to share some data from our unit. I am happy to share that our unit was part of this India COVID-19 registry, which was maintained by NNF. And this article was published in March issue of the Indian Pediatrics. It was a prospective cohort study primary outcome was incidence of perinatal transmission and the rates of SARS-CoV-2 virus positivity and comparison between intramural and extramural babies. So this is the flow chart of intramural neonates. The total reported cases were 1330. SARS positive neonates were 143. Out of those, 102 were asymptomatic, 30 were symptomatic. And look at this, in first 3 days, 106 babies were positive out of the 143. For extramural, of course, the similar distribution. This is the demographics or the risk factor of those babies. I showed you this table just to highlight one thing, that prematurity was higher in positive babies as compared to negative babies. And even today, there is an observation. Obstetricians can tell you they are in the better position, that prematurity is more in positive mothers as compared to negative mothers. So it's very important that we need to prevent COVID during pregnancy, and vaccination of the mothers is very important. Because if we vaccinate the mothers, the benefits will be passed on to the fetus also, and that is naturally the baby is going to be protected. Even today, there is no recommendation of vaccinating in India, this pregnant and lactating women, and even in children. So vaccination is very important. Some of the other countries have already started. But recently, the POXI in April 2021 has recommended that the care providers should be allowed to administer the COVID-19 vaccine in pregnant and breastfeeding women. But mind you, the government has not yet permitted. It has yet to come with the recommendation. So Covaxin and Covishield not yet being started for pregnant, lactating women and children. A little bit about our experience that was part of that registry. We had a triage at entry point by obstetricians. They segregated the mothers. That was in the first wave. We had 4 areas in the first wave, non-COVID NICU. Then unstable babies delivered to women from hotspot zone. That was another area. Then unstable COVID-19 positive babies, then stable babies kept in PNC ward. So a lot of mess. But we started rooming in, and then the things started easing out. Health workers were segregated, residents were segregated. This was our flow chart at our institute of managing these babies. So if the baby is born to a positive mother and admission is needed, admitted in COVID positive. If admission is not indicated, then the baby is kept with the mother. So this is the data of our experience till now in the first and second wave. Up till now, there are 206 positive mothers delivered. There were 38 preterm, that is 18.5%. 161 were term and 7 were post-date. And there were 34% babies with low birth weight. So there were 42% babies in the NICU, 50 were admitted. Of course, 3-4 now in this wave we have admitted more, so it should be around 54. The most common reason was prematurity, then the respiratory distress, then the PROM, prolonged PROM for perinatal asphyxia, congenital malformations, and in few babies IDM and LOS. The respiratory support, of course, required was mainly because of the neonatal problem like MAS, RDS, and congenital pneumonia. So up till now, we have 14 babies which are COVID positive. 13 were asymptomatic. 1 was symptomatic with fever, feed intolerance on day 5. 1 baby had very high D dimer, 3,400, but which resolved subsequently without treatment. So this is first wave data. There were 7 deaths in the first wave out of 148. But these were mostly related to the neonatal morbidities. But look at this aspiration 2 babies. I'm a little concerned about this aspiration thing because these babies were kept with the mothers. And my perception is whether these babies had problem or the mother had a problem, and that is why the baby is aspirated. So sometimes that is a risky affair, and we need to counsel the mother properly. In the second wave, there are 58 mothers who delivered, which were positive, and the 3 deaths were there again related to the neonatal morbidities. One important thing I wanted to tell you is in the second wave, in the first wave, what happened is it was a non-selective screening. Any mother coming to GMC from hot zone, we used to test, and so a lot of asymptomatics. And there was out of 148 only 1 death. In second, there are 58 positive. Most of them they are symptomatic, non-selective. Only if symptoms are there, they were tested. But there were 9 deaths amongst 58 mothers in the second wave. And there were 2 stillbirths. Out of those 9, there were 2 stillbirths. And 2 ANC were there. And these mothers had moderate to severe illness, most of these. So that is what I was trying to tell you, that perception of mild illness in the mothers is probably wrongly founded, and we need to rethink about it. We now give exclusive breastfeeding as and when the baby is stable. In initial days, it was very difficult because the mothers were kept in a separate facility. Our NICU was in separate facility, and a lot of apprehension from the mothers. So 50 babies were just on formula, not receiving breastfeeding. So this is the distribution of first and second swab. We do both the swabs in most of the babies, unless the first is positive. Otherwise, most of the babies will undergo 2 swabs. So 196 babies were discharged. There were 10 deaths, mostly related to the neonatal morbidities. And this is the summary of perinatal COVID, right from the antenatal period to the postnatal period. This is the postnatal COVID ward. I told you that we need to keep the cradles, and because in between the beds having a 6 feet distance is not possible, we keep them at the foot end. So naturally there is a 6 feet distance. So mother can keep the babies there after breastfeeding. And this is our COVID NICU. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, can you stop sharing?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for such a lucid presentation. And I think you have cleared our every doubt, right from precautions to be taken in the labor room, when to test the babies, what are the different manifestations, how we should be alert, and what are the changing situations since first wave to second wave. And sir, we will first go to question answer session. I am able to see so many questions in the chat box. So first is, do you see features like Kawasaki, and when to use IVIG? Can we use it in units?
We do MIS, exactly not a Kawasaki. It's a Kawasaki-like syndrome with a coronary dilatation. Even in MISC, it's not Kawasaki, but it is Kawasaki-like illness. In neonate, there are case reports which are ticking in. We had one baby of coronary dilatation, but we were not thinking that time of MIS in neonates. But that baby was stable and was discharged in our unit. But now that is being seen, and so it is very important if a baby is born to COVID positive mother, even if the baby is negative, we need to keep a high index of suspicion of MIS. Don't label it as a Kawasaki.
Okay, so these are two different presentations, MISC and Kawasaki. So Kawasaki we haven't yet seen in any neonate. Okay, sir. The other question is, what should be the ideal earliest timing for screening in a newborn when vertical transmission is not very common way of transmission? I think, sir, you have answered this question in your presentation. Immediately after birth, and if not positive, and if you are having high index of suspicion, between 5 to 14 days, if I am right. Okay, sir.
Yes, yes.
Okay, sir.
But madam, one thing, if first, now that thinking was there because it is going to add to the burden. Particularly when I am working in the public hospital, I have to do two swabs. We need to have the baby. We need to send the swab, wait for the report. So I was thinking of having just one swab on day 3, day 4. If the baby is stable, or when at the time of discharge, and then send the baby home. But it may create a lot of other issues. Because if the baby is not tested, then the parental anxiety starts building up. They get it from others that it can happen from the baby. So, and secondly, the nursing and whether the baby is affected horizontally. So all those issues are there. So right now we have not changed the policy, but my perception is this 2 swab business has to come to an end. We need to do a 1 swab only. When in adults we have switched to 1 swab, why in units we are doing 2 swabs? Unless it is a research purpose. I told you in the lecture. Why, if it my first RT-PCR is positive in newborn, it doesn't mean it is a vertical transmission. Even if I find an RT-PCR positive on placental tissue, it is not going to be vertical transmission. That is not the proof. Because then I have to document that virus which is detected in the baby's throat is live virus.
Sir, the next question is, should we screen every pregnant patient in labor room for RT-PCR and COVID antibody?
That test, they are doing, those obstetricians. RT-PCR, I do not know whether it should be done in all mothers, but in pandemic like this, it is preferable. It is preferable if we have the time to do RT-PCR.
And antibodies in mother, what about that, sir?
If based on RT-PCR, then you take a call. Or if there is a history or suspicion, or she is from the hot zone, do an antibody also. But do it maybe after birth. Then you can do of the baby also and monitor that baby very closely for MIS.
Or any manifestation in babies, just like Hedegaard patient, if the IVC thrombus, if any high index of suspicion,
that is a different story, madam. We are not catching the baby early. The question is,
yes,
if suppose baby is found to have antibodies, even if we do, and baby is asymptomatic, then what to do? Yes. My perception is, if you have the facility, you do the cardiac markers, you do the echo, document the coronaries, and I am eagerly waiting to see serial echocardiography, whether it picks up the MIS early in these babies, coronary score and whatnot.
Next question is, when should we screen baby born to mother with IgG antibodies positive mother?
Pardon?
If the mother is IgG positive, antibodies positive in mother, when should we screen the baby?
It's going to be immediately after birth. There will be some through the breast milk, but I just want to know what are the titers in the mother and what are the titers in the baby. So sometimes we do not know. And secondly, the important thing is we have to look at the stage of the maternal infection. If the mother has a history, when did she have the infection? 2 months back, 1 month back, or it is an active infection? And whether the antibodies are simultaneously, are they produced simultaneously once the mother is infected or once the baby is infected? That is the question. But the studies have shown that after day 10 of the infection, mothers will start producing antibodies. So they will come in the baby for transplacental passage. Okay.
One more question is, rash over face and trunk mimicking erythema toxicum on day 2 of birth, IgG antibodies positive mother, how to proceed? Mother is having antibodies positive, and rash over face and trunk like erythema toxicum.
Baby.
Baby.
So baby, you have to just clinically monitor. Rash is there like erythema toxicum, but you need to keep a high index of suspicion of MIS. I told you. But we do not yet know whether only the rash which is on the face, because then you do evaluate the baby for other markers also for MIS, like cardiac involvement. The predominant feature, at least in case reports which have come, is a cardiac involvement. Document a cardiac involvement. Along with that, if there is a modes, other organ involvement or coagulopathy, then your diagnosis is made.
Sir, Datta Kadam sir is asking, we advise breastfeeding, but in one of slide, it is shown avoidance of breastfeeding.
My slides.
Yes, like that. Is it like changing
I don't know.
scenarios?
If that is there, then I pardon me, sir, because I told you this must be my 6th presentation on perinatal COVID. And same slides I have keep on changing. But now there is no doubt that breastfeeding should be given.
Okay. Sir, we want to know about the routine vaccination in COVID positive babies.
COVID positive babies, it is preferable to defer it a bit, because we need to monitor this baby for COVID manifestations. Maybe after 10 to 14 days, we can, if there are no manifestations, we can definitely give this baby vaccination. Other babies, their routine immunization before discharge has to be done. Hepatitis B, BCG, and OPV.
Sir, Kedar wants to know our neonatology man and our quality neonatologist. He wants to know, have you used quality improvement for any QI for any improvement in process flow?
We are not documented, Kedar, but I personally feel I am not a core quality improvement man like you, but my perception is whatever we do to try to improvise the process is a quality improvement. So we have done trial and error so many times. I have forgotten how many times I have tried and done so many things, because my setup changed 3-4 times. NICU setup itself changed 3-4 times. So now what I have done is, I'll tell you one thing. We have not kept the data of monitoring. There were so many areas. I told you there are 4 areas and all that. Now I have made a 12-bedded NICU, COVID NICU, where suspect as well as positive are kept together only. And initially we were not allowing this and that and that. Now I am allowing caregivers. Now my nursing staffs are worried, sir, the caregiver yailin, mother yailin, आम्हाला होईल. तर तुम्हाला काय होणार नाही, तुम्ही तुमचं प्रॉपर किट घाला म्हणलं.
Sir, one more question. I think this is the last question. Is there any special technique of swab taking in neonates? Should we take both nasal and oropharyngeal swab in the neonates?
It is preferable to take nasal as well as oropharyngeal, nasopharyngeal as well as oropharyngeal. If the technique is same, but it is preferable in neonates, little non-traumatic sticks should be used, maybe plastic sticks, which are flexible. And only when inserting for the oropharyngeal swab, it is always better to insert along the palates. For insert it till there is a register. And those soft sticks, it is preferable in neonates.
Sir, still 1, 2, 3 questions. Role of inflammatory markers, how we can use them in COVID MIS in neonates when they are already deranged in sepsis also. So how can we differentiate in the inflammatory markers whether they are due to COVID MIS or routine bacterial sepsis? That is one more question.
It's a good question, but another thing I told you that it can mimic sepsis, number 1. Number 2 is in MIS associated with those inflammatory markers, cardiac markers will also be increased. Then it clinches the diagnosis.
Yes, that is.
Plus the culture, if you have culture negativities, again helps us. But we have to look at overall picture, not look at just the markers. What is the situation of the baby? What are the risk factors for sepsis? What are the predominant features like?
Why RT-PCR and no more rat in units?
I don't find any rationale for rat. If I am doing it in 24 hours, where from the antigenemia is going to build up? That won't add to anything if the rat is negative. I don't know there is any data. I have not come across data of rat positive in neonate rat positivity, but somebody can do it in the late, late presentation, or maybe after 1 week, we may try doing rat also. But then it is so low sensitive test. If you have to do one test, do an RT-PCR. All the more less traumatic for the baby.
Sir, what is the concept of negative pressure resuscitation room? Is it possible in our GMC setup, and what are the advantages of it?
Question कोणी विचारलं त्याच्यावर आहे.
Question विचारलेला आहे
अमित
अमित.
No, it's not possible. We can have that room, but I don't know whether it will function and all that. You apart the joke, but wherever it is possible, and there are corporate hospitals which are already done that, mind you. Not that this is an exaggeration. Negative pressure rooms, they are built up, or labor room, or even the mother's rooms. Many of them, they have kept that. But I won't recommend it in a public hospital. Better to have 2 exhaust fans or well ventilated room. बऱ्याचदा मी खिडक्या उघडून टाकते NICU. कारण माझ्या एसीचा मला भरोसा नाही, ते 12 एअर एक्सचेंज देते, HEPA फिल्टर लावते आता.
Sir, if the mother is on remdesivir, should we breastfeed the baby?
Yes, of course. The important thing is you have to know that remdesivir is not absorbed, very little is absorbed through oral route, even in adults. तर बेबीला दिल्यानंतर तर ते ब्रेस्ट फिडिंग केलं तर काय होणार नाही. आणि बेबीजला द्यायला म्हणजे देर वॉज अ रिपोर्ट. I don't know whether there is an excretion in the breast milk and the oral is effective. We used to treat tail tuberculosis. इथे INH सिक्रेट होते, मग ते बेबीला थोडं prophylaxis मिळते असं.
Okay, sir. Khandelwal sir, I think we have
one more question. Is there any correlation between ESR and CRP?
Yes.
In
CRP?
In COVID?
Yeah.
Both are markers of inflammation, so I don't think there is any correlation. But I don't know whether ESR is anybody doing. लॅबवाले छापत असतील पण ते करत असतील मला वाटत नाही. Of late I have stopped asking for micro ESR. When you have such an good CRP, nephelometry quantitative test ni केलं तर it is good.
Yes, sir. Anybody wants to ask any question?
Can you unmute yourself?
You can unmute
and you can ask the question.
I think, sir, you have covered every aspect of.
Hello.
Don't think question.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Routinely, every mother is not tested for COVID, and we attend the delivery, and that time baby is absolutely fine. Okay, then in normal delivery, discharge on day 2. So in such a cases, newborn routine vaccination can be done, or for the safer side, we should defer the vaccination. And if yes, then for how many days?
Sir, it is better to do a routine vaccination. Why to defer that?
Because
Even
mother
if-
is not
even if
tested and
mother
it turned
is-
out to
mother is-
positive.
One moment. Even if mother is positive and baby is normal, healthy, to give vaccination.
But if that baby present on day 2 or day 3, and we have given on day 1 itself, suppose, and these are the live vaccines.
Yeah.
So to
Positive babies, we
Any
need to
troublesome?
differ. In positive babies, we need to differ. So if there is a suspicion, high chances of, because you see, again, we do not know in asymptomatic mothers what is the viral load. That is the big question. And whether these babies, they come out positive, and whether it is they are really infected. Asymptomatic versus symptomatic mother. The phase of viremia also is very important, even in that. Because Earlier in the course, initial 5 days, high load of virus in the mother. During that time, if she delivers and she is RT-PCR positive, likely that the baby is likely to be positive.
That's true, sir. But routinely, this off center they don't do the testing of mothers in Indian setting. So if newborn comes in problem and you have given vaccination, so
I don't
can we
think, sir, I
means
don't think you need
pediatrician
to
come
worry
across
too
trouble?
much. I don't think if the baby is asymptomatic, very few of them
Okay,
develop problems. That is my observation. Only in late acquisition there are
Okay, sir.
many
Thank you, sir.
problems.
So there is one question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
If the mother is on FabiFlu, can she breastfeed the child?
Pardon, sir?
If the mother is on FabiFlu, breastfeeding should be continued or not?
Fabiflu rather in these mothers is little worrisome, and there is a concern regarding Fabiflu, and it should be avoided in these mothers preferably. I do not know the details of what are the impact on the mother and impact on the baby.
It should be avoided.
Yeah.
Yes, I think Khadke sir, you are there, no?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. Please, sir.
At the outset, I call Vishnu Pitama of neonatology in Marathwada region, not only Marathwada, but Maharashtra, for giving such a lucid talk on neonatal COVID. I have two simple questions for him. The only one thing which I am worried all the time is, whenever we talk about all these patients of COVID, we have forgotten about the sepsis. Sepsis and COVID mimics like anything. In rheumatology also, when we talk about sepsis and rheumatological condition, they also mimic like anything. You know, they are as good as either they are sepsis or a rheumatological condition. When we are talking about COVID, it's already an inflammatory disorder. So in rheumatological condition, we use ESR and CRP, two markers, very important to see whether it is a sepsis or it is a flare of an infection, like inflammatory. So ESR, even if it is not done properly by everybody in all inflammatory markers, please do ESR and CRP, because the CRP is early to rise and late to down. ESR is always normal initially, but late to down. If you have a CRP positive and ESR normal, make it sure that probably you are dealing with infection. And whenever you have a ESR very high and CRP marginally, probably inflammatory disorder is. So is it true in neonates also?
I don't think so, sir. I do not agree in neonatology. One thing is micro ESR, doing micro ESR. We need micro ESR, not ESR in units. You tell me one or two laboratories where they are doing it, then I will think of sending it. Number one. Number two, differentiation between using CRP and ESR. I am not aware in neonatology. Not come across any study. Number three, the sepsis is always the first diagnosis. I'll let you know. I have seen 206 babies of COVID positive mothers. But whenever the baby was ill, we suspected sepsis first and not COVID first. So that remains because our conditions are high sepsis conditions, high infection conditions. So sepsis remains the topmost diagnosis, particularly if it is an early manifestation, because early pneumonia is again not a very common observation in COVID pneumonia as compared to late or horizontal transmission. That is one thing. And secondly, whenever we are thinking of sepsis, always there are pointers to it. Similarly, for COVID-19, there are pointers to it. There is a situation, there is a mother, and there is a situation like that. So we need to look at everything and not just one marker or two markers. Particularly, these are inflammatory, even in CRP. I tell many times my residents that it is the most useless investigation in neonatology. It has created more problem than it has solved. So CRP epidemic आलेला आहे. We are just treating CRP positive baby खेळते खुते खाते सगळे पण antibiotic चा कोर्स करत येते for no reason.
Sir, it
So
was-
that is a different issue and a different platform. It needs different platform. As far as this COVID thing is concerned, I don't think I am not aware of any such comparisons. But your point is well taken.
There is one question. Do you do CSF in COVID positive babies?
CSF pleocytosis, Shamji, has been reported. Again, whether it is inflammation, and there were reports of cerebritis and encephalitis, or corona encephalitis or cerebritis. Again, anecdotal case reports were there. So not yet proven, but pleocytosis, CSF pleocytosis in 1 or 2 cases has been reported. A meningitis-like picture. And if the baby has associated neurological manifestations, then maybe yes.
If the baby is having CNS manifestation, is there any drugs which you are using
For
for COVID?
no.
Like
Specific
remdesivir,
anti-COVID,
like remdesivir?
No, I told you, no, there is no recommendation for use of remdesivir in neonates.
Even in
But the
CSF?
IOP, Shamji, 1 minute. IOP has recently come out with recommendation, but it is a very conservative recommendation, and they did not mention neonates. They mention weight criteria, more than 3.5 kilo. This should be the dose, but whether it should be used or not, as far as neonatology is concerned, I have not come across anybody, any authoritative body recommending remdesivir.
Especially if it is a neurological COVID. Like
That we will have to see. Whatever you are saying is a valid point, but we will have to suspect more. Then only we will diagnose more. Right now, what is happening is in symptomatic babies, we are thinking of usual neonatal causes. Hypoglycemia आहे का, हे आहे का, ते आहे का, ते asphyxia झाला असेल, हे झाला असेल, ते झाला असेल. So we are not digging too much, and we do not have that time or resources to explore those. Even in the first wave, mind you, I will share with you, we had planned and we had an ethical clearance for antibody testing in mother and babies, even if the baby is negative at 3 weeks or 4 weeks. But because antibody kits were not available, we could not do it.
Shamji, can I add? Shamji, can I add?
Sure.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Shamji, what you have told, CNS involvement, if really is there, then it's taken as a severe COVID. And during 5 to 7 days, there are few case reports in neonatal. They are giving remdesivir IV. There is an anecdotal report, but it is not a general recommendation. But if the CNS involvement is there, definitely it goes to in the severe form. And in severe form, these are recommended remdesivir. As LS sir has told, more than 3.5 kg till now they are recommended. And another point the Khadke sir and we are discussing, in sepsis, definitely we have to first keep as a sepsis as a first diagnosis. But there are some pointers. If blood culture is positive, then we go more in favor of sepsis. If markers are very sky high, it goes little more for in COVID rather than sepsis, because we get 100, 150. Many times we don't get in sepsis. They are borderline high. Another, if they are affording, they do procalcitonin. That will give some positive effect toward the sepsis. And another, if their cardiac markers are high, then again definitely it goes. But anyhow, in all over the world globe, even there is a neonatal sepsis and COVID, they are being treated by antibiotic. Very rare situation they are de-escalating, but definitely they are on the Ayurveda. These are difficult to really differentiate clinically. There are few, these are pointers, then we can decide.
Good point, sir, but I just want to intervene here.
Yeah.
There are 2-3 things we need to caution. One is, when you are thinking of COVID, your mind is preoccupied with COVID.
Yes.
Then you are going to go RE and you are going to cause more harm. Remember, remdesivir is very nephrotoxic, very hepatotoxic, and using in neonates, I mean, it's a big risk. You are taking a big risk. So I would personally not recommend even with an anecdotal reports, because in Ebola was a totally different situation as compared to Corona. What we have observed in Corona is most of the course is not very fulminant course. If severe is there, we do not know. Again, those are case reports. Secondly, you told about sepsis and the markers. Now the markers we are doing in COVID, probably if we would have studied all those markers in sepsis up till now, culture positive sepsis, probably we would have known how much they rise in sepsis also. Because we do not have that similar comparison with sepsis versus COVID. And procalcitonin, sir, in neonatal sepsis, because procalcitonin has a very short half-life. So it may not be a very good pointer in neonatology. So neonatology, it's lot of murky. Pediatric, yes, I agree. Because we need to have that. Or older neonates, maybe 1.5 months, 2 months, maybe yes. But in neonatal period, there are a lot of other conditions which contribute to inflammation, like asphyxia, like meconium, like prematurity itself.
Yes.
And another thing is, as you raised about inflammation, is my worry again is whether the brain injury occurring in these many CNS manifestations, what type of brain injury was it? That needs to be documented. Why? Because if the mother is positive, and as you know, there is a fetal inflammatory response syndrome, FIRS.
Yes.
Thereby, the transplacental passage as well as the fetal inflammatory markers will cause periventricular leukomalacia, periventricular damage. And whether that type of thing already happened in the baby, and we are labeling this as a severe COVID. So we need to have a lot of documentation and go very cautiously. So I told you at the beginning of my presentation, nobody on COVID is an authority. We are all in the sailing in the same boat. But you have raised a very valid point that reflects the thinking. It should be horizontally expanded and not get blocked by anything. Anything is possible. That is what you raised.
Sir, I would like to ask one question. गिरीश मोरे. सर,
मोरे कुठे आहे तू?
सर मी तुमचं पूर्ण सेशन गाडीमध्ये अटेंड करतोय सर. सर मी मगाशी प्रश्न विचारला होता. कोविड IgG पॉझिटिव्ह मदर delivered baby yesterday and today the baby has developed rash. That question was asked by me. Now today the learned parents are asking, should we go for cardiac evaluation? If yes, when? And henceforth in a pediatric practice for a private practitioner who is attending delivery calls and having an IgG positive mother and a baby, if at all comes an IgG positive, how and when should we screen for his cardiac manifestation? As you said, they have to be screened earlier. And henceforth, this in coming year or year or two, shall it be a compulsory to not face legal complications and before discharge to diagnose or evaluate the patient for cardiac manifestations and then send him home?
There are, Girish, you have raised some of the issues. One is looking at the cardiac manifestations because it requires a lot of expertise in neonatal cardiology. So we need a pediatric cardiologist, number one. Number two, I did not say that these babies, so we need to have a documentation that the baby is antibody positive.
Yes.
Even if it is RT-PCR negative.
Yes.
If baby is antibody positive, then you follow clinically, number one. Number two, you follow CBC wise, markers wise. Number three, particularly the cardiac markers.
Yes.
And then if you feel at any moment you have an expertise, you have the pediatric cardiologist, get a screen done if there is a lot of parental anxiety.
Okay,
but
sir.
again, that doesn't rule out anything. Today the screen is done, it is negative, tomorrow again baby sinks.
Yes.
We do not know. So it's a murky area. I mean, I'm not saying it is not valid, but we do not know yet.
Yes.
How it will evolve. You have to know what are your tools. My tools are echocardiography. We need a pediatric cardiologist because looking at coronaries, even a trained neonatologist, Shamji has also done it. It's very difficult in neonates.
Okay.
And then you have to keep the score.
Very difficult.
Shamji, हम भी सीख रहे हैं वाला.
Okay, sir.
मेरे
Thank you.
बच्चे सिखा रहे हैं.
और वो जो जेड स्कोर हम जो जेड स्कोर सुन रहे हैं, वो तो जो बच्चे एडमिट है उनके सबके 2.5 से ऊपर है. मैं तो इतना परेशान हूँ कि 2.5 के ऊपर जेड स्कोर देखने के बाद में मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि सब जन IV गावा खा रहे हैं. क्या बात है. और उसकी हाइट भी गिना नहीं है, जेड स्कोर निकालने के लिए हाइट गिनना पड़ती है, ये भी मालूम नहीं किसी को।
Khadke sir, one thing I just want to tell you regarding IVIG. Now there is a school of thought that since IVIG may be useful in MIS, and as Vaidya sir has said, as Girish has said, or not others have said, inflammatory markers can be raised in sepsis. Now there was a time when I used to use, you know it, IVIG for sepsis so much. So no harm, give IVIG. That is the thinking which is going among the practicing pediatricians and neonatologists. दोनों भी फायदे हो जाएंगे, ये भी काम को आएगा, उधर भी काम को आएगा.
Back to old days.
Sir, favipiravir is contraindicated, sir.
Sir, Prashant here. Till the time IVIG is available, we can use it because we know the way the drugs are becoming unavailable with the new diseases and new problems coming. So probably we will have to use it very sparingly because we will need it much more in the coming future.
Yes, very sure, very right. But another thing is, Prashant, we do not know much about MIS in neonates, like in older children, where they are generating lot of antibodies of their own. Whether it is neonates which are generating or it is a load which has come from the mother and which has caused one-time damage in neonates, that we are not sure, and whether the injury will keep on evolving. That is number one. And secondly, you see it's not only IVIG, even if you use an MPS or corticosteroid, that is also effective in MIS. May not be so in Kawasaki. It's a different ball game altogether, where there are so many things, Khadke sir, and you people know it better. But my perception is you better use an MPS or Dexa. But Dexa is a long-acting drug, so better to use an MPS.
Vaidya sir wants to ask something.
Yes, favipiravir is contraindicated, sir, because it is a 60% protein bind and it is excreted in the breast milk. So remdesivir is allowed, but favipiravir is contraindicated in breast milk.
Thank you.
I think there will be an unending session of question and answer. And we have just a brainstorming session today on neonatal COVID. As an anchor, this is the toughest session for me. It is very difficult to stop the all the questions here, but we have some time limit, so we have to stop somewhere. I think sir has yes, sir.
Sandhya, just Prashant here. Just
yes.
one comment.
Bol.
Just one comment.
Bol.
I'm really very much feel very much म्हणजे मला खूप गर्व होतो की आपण औरंगाबादचे आहोत आणि आपले सगळे स्पीकर्स आजचे औरंगाबादचे आहेत. आता IIP-च्या सेंट्रल IIP वरती असल्यामुळे म्हणा किंवा अदरवाईज पूर्ण सगळीकडचे लेक्चर्स किंवा सगळीकडचे टॉक्स मी ऐकतो आहे. आपलं LH देशमुख सरांसाठी असलेलं प्रेम, सरांचं कौतुक हे तर आपलं आहेच आहे, त्यात प्रश्नच नाही. बट ज्या पद्धतीने किंवा जे सरांचं आज लेक्चर झालं प्लस त्याच्यावरती आपली जी इंटरॅक्टिव्ह चर्चा झाली, सर सोडून बाकी सगळे जे इनपुट्स आपल्याला मिळालेले आहेत, मला खूपच गर्व आणि अभिमान वाटतो आणि आय फील म्हणजे ऑनर्ड टू बी अ पार्ट ऑफ दिस फॅमिली ऑफ औरंगाबाद अकॅडमी ऑफ पीडियाट्रिक्स. Hats off to LH Deshmukh sir and all the participants.
Yes.
3 cheers to IIP Aurangabad. 3 cheers. 3
cheers. Totally agree with you, Prashant. It was it is a very proud feel, and we are so lucky that from such stalwarts we get this feeling time and again. And such wonderful sessions even in lockdown. Because of these webinars, we are lucky to have it at any time, sitting at home. Otherwise, LS saranna एवढं डिटेल ऐकणं neonatal COVID बद्दल it was just difficult otherwise. खूप छान.
We can have a data.
True comment
Thank you.
Sir, we should make it mandatory for all the neonatologists practicing here in Aurangabad who are looking at this. So we can have a combined data of our city in this neonatal COVID situation.
नाही, त्याच्यासाठी ना गिरीश तू एक चांगला पॉइंट घेतलेला आहे. मी सुरुवातीलाच अपील केलेलं आहे की पिडियाट्रिक कोविड असो, न्यूनॅटल कोविड असो, डेटा नाही, डेटा इज पॉवर टुडे. If you have data, then only people will listen to you. And I not only here, I speak to all the students across Marathwada. and
Yes,
ask them to keep data, and ask them to keep the perinatal COVID data also.
yes, sir.
Last 2 days back, only the Latur student at GMC Latur, she shared their data of 157 mothers.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Sudhir Mule has commented nicely, sir, about this only. We may not be alive for the next pandemic, but what we can do is document our findings for the next generation. It is so true to have a
Yes,
documentation of our findings. Thanks, Sudhir,
Yes.
for that wonderful comment. And thank you, LS sir, for such a lucid presentation on perinatal COVID. I think you have cleared every doubt, and it's a journey what we are traveling through since last wave up to this wave, and the third wave we are anticipating, which may hit the children more than last two waves. So it was a very clear presentation, very doubt clearing session, and when to do the test, when to repeat the test, what drugs we can use, what precautions we should take in the labor room. Not very strict precautions, not to be panic, but at the same time we should be cautious also. Sir has asked us, told us about those precautions also. When to give the vaccines, what are the various presentations, and how we should keep alert on the various manifestations. Just now we are seeing, and in future we will see some many manifestations we haven't imagined also. So this pro BNP or troponin or these tests we didn't imagine anytime will come in the pediatric or in the neonate itself. So there should be a very high index of suspicion in the next wave, in next coming so many days, because it is not the COVID, we are more worried about the post-COVID manifestations than in adults. In pediatrics, we are very much worried for the post-COVID manifestation. So these we can see in neonates also. Thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful presentation. Thanks all the seniors, Dr. Datta Kadam sir, Dr. Khadke sir, Dr. Vaidya sir, Dr. Prashant Jadhav, Dr. Girish More, Dr. Bansal sir, Kedar, Abhishek, then I could see Sandeep, Sudhir, they were also joining us from Parbhani and Latur, Usmanabad. So thanks for the wonderful audience, and it was such a wonderful interactive session. I think we have gained a lot, and I think, sir, this is not the end. We may need many revisions, and we will need many interactive sessions which will have a benefit to all our kids in future. So thanks a lot to all. And
Sandhya, from all of us, thank you to you and to Dr. Sham sir.
Yes.
Very good, nice of you to have this idea and have Dr. LS sir guiding all of us on this wonderful topic.
Yes, sir.
Thanks a lot.
It was a great gathering.
Sir, good night, sir. LS sir, good night.
Good night, Shamji.
Sandhya Shah, you deserve our applause.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Renu, bye.
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 It was a very good session, and LS sir, we are proud of you.
I can see Samir, Rajasri, Ganesh. Thanks all for joining. Manju.
रिक्वेस्ट होती माझा एक मोबाईल नंबर आहे व्हॉट्सअप नंबर. हॅलो
सर.
मॅम एक रिक्वेस्ट होती, सरांची काही प्रेझेंटेशन असलं तर माझा मोबाईल नंबर आपण नोट डाऊन करून मला प्लीज पाठवाल का, त्यांच्या लिंक जे काही असतील. इट वॉज सो नाईस प्रेझेंटेशन.
सर, दिस ऑल सेशन
एका वर्षात एवढे प्रेझेंटेशन पाहिले.
सर, दिस ऑल सेशन इज रेकॉर्डेड.
रिअली नो डाऊट.
This all session we have recorded, and I will send the link in our group.
No. This session I attended completely in the beginning, but I'm talking about each and every session which has been held by Deshmukh sir.
Okay.
So I wanted to attend each and every session of Deshmukh sir, because today I fortunately got the link and I was very fortunate to attend this. So I want to attend each and every presentation of Dr. Deshmukh.
Dr. Rajendra
Khadke siraंनी I think exit झाले sir काय की.
Dr. Sandhya and Dr. Sikchi from Jalgaon.
Yes, yes. Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining the session.
So I would like to congratulate you. The session has been really wonderful and we learned a lot. And
Thank you,
Dr.
sir.
Deshmukh has been superb and the question answers also went on extremely well. I'm happy to see you all because Aurangabad, I have always been attending the conferences.
Yes,
And this has been really remarkable. It had been a really great feast. And to know few things also and the use of remdesivir, the way it has been being used. Rather, I would say it is being misused. And of course, as far as the neonates are concerned, no room for absolutely remdesivir also. And he has narrated extremely well. And the last question was that data, maintaining the data is really very important. So the next generation would learn a lot also. And we need to always learn. And this has been a learning process continuously. And in the last, say, 14 months, we have been learning a lot. And still, I would say it has been in a very primitive stage. We don't know what is hidden in the future as well. But many more things would come, certainly. So nice of you. All the best. Sandhya, you conducted very well.
Yes.
We are
Thank
proud
you,
of you.
sir. Thank